R, we've got some here. R for Relationism.
Relationism.
Raumdeuter. Not a clue. There's another one that Kai Havertz is referred to as.
That's what Kai Havertz is referred to.
Oh, that is the Raumdeuter.
Yeah, it's the German term for it.
And rest defense. So Relationism, Raumdeuter, and rest defense. Which would you like to go for, George, my good friend?
It sounds like you don't know what the Raumdeuter is, just from that in general. So I
what
could take
do you
that
mean?
one.
How have you inferred that?
But well, how about relationism? Do you know about relationism? Do you want to pick that? It's kind of the opposite to positional systems.
Right. So I don't know much about it, but that's never stopped me before. I think
which of those terms do you think you could tackle? And we'll go, like rest defense.
Honestly,
right?
these three are not my skill set, so I'll leave this to you. But I am going to have a stab at relationism, and I want to go there first.
Yes, please.
I think relationism. So I've seen it a lot referred to around Flamengo and that Fernando Diniz guy, and it's more to do with the players having much freer associative roles with one another in terms of less rules. In terms of there's got to be. And again, I think people get confused with positional play and say, oh, there must always be 2 players in that line and 3 in this line. It's not quite like that. But it's more a rigid sense of, right, when that happens, this needs to happen. I think relationism is much more to do with sort of creating overloads and sort of people working together and being a bit more sort of like, well, these two combine well together in these sorts of areas. Can we get them in there? And it's a lot freer, as I understand it. But I could be wrong.
No, I don't think that you're wrong. I think for the most part, relationism
I'm never
is
wrong.
Look, I think positionism is you attack via position-driven movements. They require rehearsal, coordinated positioning. You're in this zone. Certain number of players can be in that zone. It doesn't matter the profile of player that's in that zone, but you can't have too many people in that zone. It's very restricted in that manner. Whereas relationism, in a sense, it's more spontaneous attacks by allowing individuals to kind of dictate their own actions and dictate how the team likes to attack on their own. For example, I would say maybe in today's day and age, you've got the Flamengo essence where you see multiple players on one side of the pitch, right? But we had the best relationism person in the world, mate, and his name is Arsene Wenger. In terms of that, I would say it's basically this idea that you're able to allow attacking players to occupy a zone without having them think how many players should be in that zone. That's how I like to think about the major difference, because positional systems, they don't care the manner of the overload or how you get in the zone, but they do care if there's too many people in that zone. So for example, we've got 5 lanes of attack. I can't have all 5 players in the widest lane. I need minimum outlets out wide. I need minimum outlets in the center of the pitch and another one leading the 9. Those are minimum things that positional systems need. Now, for example, if I would argue Arsene Wenger, there was plenty of times that we would find our entire team over on the right, the entire team. And I think what's actually very interesting as a debate, and maybe for another pod, is I've seen Arteta lean into relationism quite a bit recently. And when we talk about these overloads, there's quite a bit of times, if you actually look at Jorginho, he's asking players to drip and drop off into the left-hand side when we've got the ball. And you can start to see that there's a lot more emphasis that we're looking to combine a bit more when we have that. But as soon as we lose the ball, there's this strict shift into positional play where everybody knows what zone they have to crash into. And look, that balance is going to be a coaching decision. For me, I do prefer structure. I'm very pragmatic as an idea, but the difference between the two really has to do with one, relationism being you let the players decide where they're going to go. You give them the freedom to cheat. They don't have to occupy particular zones. Whereas positional systems and positional movements is that they require kind of coordinated positioning, and there's a minimum number of players that must occupy a zone, and you can't get away from that.
Do you think there is one's better or one's worse, or is it a kind of horses for courses type scenario?
I firmly believe that there's no tactic that you can use for all and for at all moments. And I think that these go in cycles. And I think that the best teams use both. I think that there's a time to be pragmatic, there's a time to be creative. And restricting too much in either sense means that you lose the essence of what's beautiful in both. And they're naturally yin and yangs. If I constantly have too much, for example, working hard, that's a great trait to have. You work too much, you lead to burnout. You don't work enough, you're lazy. And it's all in this sense of space, right? The whole idea is space on a football pitch. How do I maximize that space? Some people believe the more people I have there means there's more options. There's more ball to feed options. That's relationism. Positionism isn't exactly that. It believes, okay, the ball might be there, but you need to understand that in order for us to create space, I need to have my players out on the wings to create space elsewhere. And if he's not there, and we keep the players inside, you're never going to create that space. So they have their moments, and I think right now you're going to have very different schools of thoughts. I think there's more positional coaches than there are relationism coaches. Cesc Fabregas, ironically, is somebody who isn't a coach yet, but who talks quite a bit about relationism. Doesn't like the rigidity of the positional structure that he sees in modern football. And I do think that you're going to see people rise up to not critique it, but to challenge it. It's only natural that we get, football goes in cycles. I maintain this, mate. There's nothing that we haven't seen before, but there's always something that we don't value in the moment the same. So back three systems were the furor, and then it became 4-3-3. Now it's slowly becoming 4-4-2, in my opinion, which then means as a response, I do think the back three system will come into play, and we're seeing it with this 3-4-3 diamond. That Cruyff will come up, and it's just, mate, there's only so many things that you can do on a football pitch. And as a coach, you're constantly saying, okay, if I see this team line up in a particular way, how do I exploit it? And if I'm not a team that can effectively produce positional systems, then what's better? Do I force my players to do something that they're not natural at? Or do I try to create creativity that is very difficult to coach out? And equally, you need quality to do that. So it's a touch and go. I don't know if I have an opinion on what's better than the other, but I do say there's a time and place for each one.
So with Arteta then, returning to Arsenal, is there a kind of narrative to weave then that if you look at the beginning of the Arteta reign, there was a sort of a level of rigidity to our football that possibly came from those really strict rules, and now we're seeing the sort of the sprinklings of, let's call it relationism, but all it is really is a little bit more freedom, a bit, a little bit less. I'm not going to kill you if you come out of your zone now because I trust you, and it kind of makes sense. It's like if you had really, I don't know, if you were going into a house and have you ever seen Super Nanny? Yeah. So obviously, when she first goes in, there's like, right, we're going to set some very clear boundaries, whatever. And then by the end, there's a bit of love with it, and the kids are kind of, they can talk back to her a little bit or whatever. There's like a little bit, more freedom, and that is really what you want. It's like you want to kind of arrest that. Clearly, what was a bit of a mess, sort of structurally in terms of Arsenal's game model. Arrest that, get some really clear principles. When you stand here, you need to stand there. When he is doing this, you need to be doing this. And then you can start to, and also once you get better players, because again, it's like, what players do you want expressing themselves individually? You don't want Shkodran Mustafi expressing himself on the ball. You don't mind if it's William Saliba expressing himself on the ball. You don't want, Kolasinac expressing himself in the final third. You might want, Kieran Tierney or whatever. So I think it's horses for courses. I think you're right. The final thing on this though is, why do you think it's been? Why do you think positional play over relationism? Because these ideas have both been around for a long time. Why do you think that's sort of been a bigger feature of the Premier League than maybe relationism has been? Why is that? Is it because it suits the English game better, or?
I think it has to do with the off-the-ball pressure and the athletes that we have in today's game. Right. I think that there's always been a level of athleticism, but look at Ben White. Has Ben White ever played fullback in any era? That's really weird to me. I don't think I've ever seen that type of a fullback.
Well, he doesn't have the application. He doesn't have the mental applications to do it. So
there's a bit of that. He's just a little dumb. But there's also William Saliba, mate, and Gabriel. like have a look at some of these athletes, like center backs that are also able to move like tens. Like Saliba for me is a genetic and physical freak. Like I've seen people with his frame before. I've never seen them move that way. And
Konate is a great example. Konate has everything Saliba has, but you watch him move, it's different.
Very different. And I just think that you're looking at people like Amadou Onana, who in previous iterations would have just been destroyers that are now trying to be used in 6 potential, and we're trying to move players in. This idea of an inverted fullback, by the way, the fullback position is an entire debate that we'll go into and maybe in another pod. That's been throughout the years the most changed position. But I do think that the reason positional systems have been a lot more in play is also to do with our generation. I'll make this point. We are, as young people, you, my age, like people forget, like we're the age of footballers. And I do think that our need for structure and this new generation's need for structure is very different to 15, 20 years ago. And I think that there's a lot more expectation about syllabuses and about clear roles and responsibilities. You're having discussions right now in the job and the workplace where people are sitting there and employees are demanding vacation pay, demanding certain salaries, demanding a level of expectation and work from home that I think is very different to what the case was 20 years ago. And you see this gap, by the way, in how Rio Ferdinand talks. And then you look at, say, a Paul Pogba or even a Granit Xhaka. I think he's actually offered quite a bit of insights into this in different ways. And he's talked quite a bit about how comfortable he felt with Mikel telling him exactly what to do. Arsene Wenger never told you what to do. He wanted you to figure it out on your own because he felt that that led to better learning. And that style, though, is relationism. Positionalism is telling you you need to be here and gaining confidence from it.
And it kind of depends as well. Yeah, you're right. I think it could be a generational thing, and also those guys who maybe are at the top of their game now. When they were kids, what was the culture like? That's interesting. I wonder if there's like a read into that. But 100% there is. There's 2 different styles of leadership. In the end, I think it comes down to how competent you think the manager is. I always think this. In the end, if you trust and believe that your manager is competent, you can deal with any management style. If someone's really sort of helicoptery and very sort of like, you need to be doing this, if you believe that they're getting the best results and you trust them, you'll go along with it. If you don't trust them, even and if they left you alone, you wouldn't get the good result. Like it doesn't matter. In the end, the trust and the belief that person is competent will lead to the best results. So I think that's interesting. Let's move forward from R because we've got quite a few more things to go. We still got roundouter and rest defense. Do you want to give us a quick definition of my perfectly pronounced word just there?